Ancient beats beneath my feet. Patterns pound and play and pray. Moving with the morning sun. Pulse of the earth flow through me. Power pushing past the pain. Breaking barriers, building bridges. Moving through the mountain range. Finding forces.
We had brought up, the likelihood of when everything starts going more formally, the necessity of vetting, having participants, people who are interested in going to retreats is one thing.
Yeah.
But the necessity of actually vetting, and that's kind of where I see you have a lot more experience in already doing this.
Right.
What kind of vetting process do you go through?
Yeah. So I'm the way that I work is I do ketamine assisted psychotherapy. So the vetting process looks like a couple steps. First is either people reach out to me because they know that I am a ketamine assisted psychotherapist, or I also get referrals from other people that refer their clients. And so I just have a conversation with them about it, just kind of naturally, like, here's what it is and here's how it works. And then my vetting process is I send them for a medical evaluation. So they meet with some folks on my med team, which are like psychiatric nurse practitioners. And then the med team kind of does like a much more formal medical evaluation and just make sure that it's an appropriate treatment for them, because, we don't want anyone to get harmed. So that's kind of how that bridge works in my world. And so if they kind of pass med check, then they're good to go. And then we start scheduling like what I call like a preparation session. So like, what do you want to get out of it? And then they'll come into the office, or we do it virtually, and we do, they'll do the dosing with me. And then in the next week, we do a follow-up. So it's not even just a one and done, like after the dosing within that 7-day neuroplasticity window, then we'll do a follow-up appointment and they'll come in and talk about their process more and just how did it go, and that really kind of creates this structure of safety. And then I'm also taking clinical notes, making sure that if anything goes wrong, that's sent to my med team. They can kind of evaluate it. Do we need to change the dosing or not? I'm also taking vitals in session. So before we start dosing, we do blood pressure and heart rate. So.
When you mention the neuroplasticity time frame, that to me says something about, are there literally neural pathways being exchanged, changed, opened? Are we talking like new synapses connections being made, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the dosing is just kind of one of those pieces. And then what happens in that neuroplasticity window is exactly what you just said. Like, there are new neural pathways that are activated. There are synapses that are firing. People are learning a lot more information. And so they may feel a certain way or have an experience kind of during the dosing session. But then in that kind of like 7-day window afterward, things can kind of move around and they can shift, and people can come up with new perspectives on usually kind of what they were targeting when they came in and they did their preparation work. So most people kind of come in and they say like, I want to move this around, or I'd like to work on this, or this one thing that happened to me in the past is kind of stuck somehow, and I'd like to see it shift. And sometimes the dosing provides that in a very clear way. And then sometimes the dosing, they go on this journey and they're not quite sure, where they ended up. But then maybe in that 7-day window, they come up with more insights about it. So.
And that's where the more counseling sessions and the kind of debriefs are more essential, right? Because you could... Yeah. As we first had our conversation before, I had a a thought of, some people are possibly going to go into, like a dark night of the soul moment of like all of a sudden having a perspective paradigm shift of their own selves.
Yeah.
And being awakened to a different possibility where they understood everything one way, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
that's just what I was raised with.
Yeah.
Now it's completely different.
And I think that's why most people seek out, psychedelic treatments, whether that be ketamine or MDMA or psilocybin or bufo or anything like that. They want to have this like different perspective that these medicines offer, right? And then what we're doing right now is kind of a both and model, right? Like these ancestral practices, we know they provide meaning. They provide this amazing kind of soul depth. There's a ritual involved. And then the both and model says that, hey, science can also live within this, and we can have, like you talked about, kind of safety, kind of more screening procedures, some more structure around it so that, we're really doing people a solid by making sure that they have a good experience too. So,
And this is what I really love about your approach and your aspect of where you are already involved, but also headed in the direction of, it sounds like kind of integrating with, people who are more on that shamanistic path.
yeah.
And the scientific realm merging, where it was nice, I want to say, at some point in time for the shaman to prepare a person and put them through the ritual.
Yep.
In this day and age, the human mind isn't what it used to be. It has much more baggage, I want to say, than back in a tribal setting would have ever held. I think we got a lot more to weigh in and to cipher through.
Yeah.
So that's something that I was bringing up with, the other participants that I've been speaking with who are already in the serving world. And I think they're coming more from that side of one or the other. And it's very nice to have a conversation with you because it sounds like you've kind of been on both sides of this.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in both. I've had clients that have experienced both. I worked closely with a client for years that does go into kind of the traditional healing ceremonies route. And then it's interesting, she'll come back and see me just as like her primary therapist, and we'll talk about that. And and other healing modalities like breath work or, Kundalini yoga or anything. I think that there used to be kind of these two camps, like you were either in one or you were in the other. And what I'm loving about this now is that we're saying like it doesn't have to be like that. Like we can live together in a ancestral wisdom and also psychotherapy and also science. And I think the reason why it matters right now is because we know that as a culture, kind of like you said, I'm going to call it a mental health crisis. We are in a cultural mental health crisis, and a lot of people don't respond to psychopharmacology, right? Or we call it like they're treatment resistant. I would also beg to differ, like, do a lot of those psychopharmacology medications actually work? I've seen the other end of it where people have been on a lot of them and prescribed way too much, and they're doing harm. So I think psychedelics are kind of reemerging, and they're not new, but maybe we're reevaluating that they can be extremely effective. So we're just kind of connecting science with ancient ways of healing, and as a culture, because we're in this crisis, we're more open to that idea. So I think it's really wonderful because a lot of these treatments, like ketamine, for example, We really say like about 8 dosing sessions with um, the level of medication that most of my clients take. It has long-term effects. So, I mean, imagine that difference, right? Getting placed on a psychopharmacology SSRI, let's say like Prozac, and not knowing how long you're going to have to take it, not knowing how hard it might be to come off of it, where you could do potentially 8 dosing sessions of ketamine and it can change your life. That's a huge, huge
Right.
difference, right?
And that's something that I want to say the scientific world for some time has definitely, I want to say, discounted the soul, discounted the efforts of the shamanistic world as a realistic practice.
Yeah.
And not to say that was a whole, but it was the majority. And I do a lot of times look at that as, well, is there any money in the cure, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's goes along with there's cars that could run off of hydrogen. I know how to convert simple salt water into hydrogen, and it's nothing but regulating that for a car to drive off of it. But we'll never see it because it would be so inexpensive and it would ruin an industry,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And this is the crux of the matter, turns into helping people in a way that doesn't turn into something that's hijacked and turned into, the large big pharma's realm of, okay, so
Yep.
we see you doing something over here. We're going to hijack it and turn it into a medicine.
Right. And I hear that fear. Yeah. And also, I think what's amazing about the roots of kind of these indigenous traditions is that they think of healing as not just symptom reduction. It's really like you said, it's soul work. So there's so much more to symptom reduction in psychedelics, right? Because then we include meaning, we include identity, we include connection, right? There's a ritual, there's a ceremony,
Right.
that's a community, and that's just it's so much different than the alternative, right?
And I think it's the inclusion of the spirit and the energetic self, the dreaming body, being included in the prescription. It is also a part of what is being cured rather than just a physical attack. Like we need to go at the brain or we need to go at the physiology and adjust chemistry, because that is the medical approach typically. And psychology has, I mean, psi in it.
Yeah.
It has always been about the spirit, but I want to say it to me, in which I am a admitted layman in the whole subject, but to me, I've always looked at psychology as far deeper involvement into the spirit than it was ever allowed to be in its full capability. I think it was withheld in a sense and kept in the science realm
Yeah.
more than it ever wanted to be. I think it knows more about the spirit.
Yeah, I agree. I think when we first spoke, you mentioned Jung, and I think that that's the closest we've gotten,
Yeah,
really, that's documented. But you're right. I think that, traditional psychotherapy and, the people that wrote the DSM really focused on symptoms and symptom clusters and how do we fix it rather than, yeah, maybe it's a mind, body, and spirit sort of an issue, right? And I
right.
think the practitioners that understand that we're not just living with our head cut off from the rest of us, right? I think are doing this deeper work. And there's this need for this deeper work that is emerging because we're just not people aren't getting better when we're doing kind of those more traditional psychotherapy treatments. So
I don't know why, but I was a little bit drawn just now when you said, your head removed from the rest of the symptoms. I've had a thought before about the body storing different issues in different places. And I've heard that there's neuromatter in your solar plex that is almost just as active as your brain,
yeah,
just on a different level. But then it also is in your legs and different areas. Your nervous system is actually your brain throughout your body.
yeah.
So does it not say that different areas of the body also need to be addressed in healing as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole kind of offshoot of psychotherapy right now that we call like somatic psychotherapy, and I think that they really understand that. Specifically, I've done a lot of studying about trauma, and we know that trauma is stored in the body, right? And so in order to uh, process it, draw it out, we do have to activate our nervous system. We do have to activate body. We have to pay attention to it. And so, again, like somatic psychotherapy kind of covers that. I truly believe in it. Actually, a visual I really like is if you were to split the body in half, it's kind of gruesome, but if you were to split the body in half like this, your gut and your brain look almost identical, right? So
Ooh,
we talk about like that gut brain connection, and people will say like, oh, you need to follow your gut, whatever. But this is giving us a lot of information, right? We give so much power to this thing between our eyes, but like what about the rest, right? And so that's why we now have dance therapists and music therapists and yoga therapists and people that understand that we also need to address body, right?
I agree. And I myself in my own journey of awakening to my own emotions and guidance of intuition have found that I'm happiest and it's easiest to make the best decisions when I feel it here. Not my gut, not my brain, but when it comes from my heart space,
Yeah.
I know that I'm doing the right thing. And until it's aligned there, I typically won't even make a decision. And if I feel it in my gut and I feel it in my brain,
Mm-hmm.
I feel that I still need to process further because I don't feel it in my heart yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think part of our job in this realm is really teaching people to pay attention to it. I teach mindfulness, and the way that I describe it in a very simple way is that, little kids are mindful, and you can see it in the way that they move in their body, right? Like, for example, you watch like a child that's like 0 to 6, and they kind of walk goofy, and they move and they say kind of goofy things, and whatever, but it's because they haven't started thinking yet. They haven't like turned on that thinking brain. They're just more in their body, right? And so if we could get
Right.
people back into the body state to actually pay attention to body, like we would be so much better off, because we're overthinkers. We're taught how to think at a very young age. Actually, it's sad when you see kids like turn it on. We're taught in school, okay, stand in the line, stay still, walk in a line, right? And you can see like the kids stop doing this goofy movement, and they start like looking up, because the thinking has turned on. So really, to get people back into that kind of childlike mindfulness state, we need to learn how to turn off the thinking and do what you just said, like pay attention to our bodies.
So that brings up the concept of the then and when, the future and the past, and
Yeah.
how we are weighing things on past experience or future expectations rather than experiencing the now and coming from this is how I feel about what I'm about to do, rather than what I think.
Right.
And this is from future and past expectations or experience.
Right.
I think a lot of that is found through the psychedelics, personally, is not measuring things by that as much as how it feels in the moment and moving from the now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that seems to have much bearing on the healing process, is awakening to distill it down a bit to being aware of the now and staying there.
Yeah. And I mean, we know that when people are in like a psychedelic assisted process, it's not very long that they're in that, space. I think a lot of fear around it is like, well, I don't know how long this is going to last, or, what is it going to be like? But just the fact that it does get you there, and then I always say it kind of like allows you to kind of get out of your own way, right? Because you are put into this space where you are present, right? You are fully present. You are in it. You are just experiencing, you are going through the journey, and you're not controlling it, right? Like everything that we do as humans during the day is very calculated. It's very controlled. And what psychedelics allows us to do, specifically with healing, is just to drop into that non-controlling space, right? And then you're able to be really present in the now.
I like it. And part of what we're going to be moving into very soon is having these conversations, I think, in kind of a group setting. And I did want to ask if you were open to set up soon some of these meetings that have, I can't see doing more than maybe 4 participants at a time.
Yeah.
But I like to have these conversations, and I think, opening subjects and bouncing with the random nature that I have is helpful, but I don't have the background that you or let's say Ray or different people have far more experience and education than I do.
Yeah.
And to have you all bouncing these ideas off each other, being that there is a possibility that we're creating a group that will be working with each other in the future.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Are you go for it?
Oh, I said I'm absolutely open to it. I mean, I feel like it is our future, and the more that we can have these conversations, that we're normalizing that this is the direction we're going, and like you said, people have different backgrounds and different experiences, and I am a big believer that we can all learn a lot from each other, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I'm real good at open conversation and randomness and just pulling off of, I think I have a little bit of a ability to reach in and feel what people want to say in a sense, and then just pull it out. But when I'm talking to, let's say, Josie, who has the experience in alchemy and creation of medicines and stuff, I have this thought in my head of what does that conversation look like between the two of you, and then adding Ray in, who has the experience of traumatic, harsh experience in life, and what it is to overcome that and help other people by serving medicine. There's the experiences are vast in different directions towards the same goal, though.
Yeah.
I feel excited to put you all together and watch these conversations.
Me too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Very cool. So as far as your daily goings on,
Mm-hmm.
would you like to share some of what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, how did I get here? I guess is our a question we should answer.
Yeah.
I've been a licensed therapist for 16 years now. And like I said, I have a background in trauma. So I do some trauma treatments. One is called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And I think EMDR is extremely effective. It's interestingly very similar in nature to how psychedelics work. You know, we really want people to kind of be able to drop into this process, trust in the process, kind of move out of their own way and be able to kind of process through traumatic memory. So I was doing EMDR for a long time, kind of as long as I've been licensed. It's a large um, education certification process that is pretty intense. So anyway, I've been doing it for a long time. And I started finding that some people can't drop into the process just as they are. So I tried to figure out, like, okay, like, what are some alternatives? Because I know that this works, I know that it helps people. And so I started sending people out to ketamine, and they would come back and be like, oh my gosh, it worked. You know, I'm able to kind of like process through some of my trauma. And then what was missing at the time when we first started doing this is the assisted psychotherapy piece. So when ketamine kind of first came on our healthcare market, right? It was just mostly IV clinics. So people would go, they'd be set up with an IV, and you know they'd be there for the dosing, and that's it. And then they would leave. Maybe if they were lucky, they you know had a therapist that they could process them with some things with, but most of them would not also have psychotherapy at the same time. And then they just kind of leave the clinic and have to kind of, you know, process through some of this information on their own. So that's where I found, you know, that I could be trained as a ketamine assisted psychotherapist. And I really think that like symbiotic relationship of a healer or a therapist, you know, with someone that's experiencing the psychedelics has such a greater impact, right? I mean, obviously, you're aware of like traditional rituals and how, again, that community, that connection, that someone leading you through the process that you can rely on, that you can trust, right? Is a huge part of that process. And so I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to know that I'm not just kind of sending my clients in the wilderness and do their dosing on their own, you know, like how do I, you know, lean into this process and kind of be part of it. So that's kind of where the ketamine came in, is really influenced by my trauma work. So
I love it. It's definitely the fostering of the spirit and the body both
yeah,
to bring about a whole process.
right.
Well, I did notice that this Zoom meeting was kind of set at only 40 minutes. I'm not sure
Yeah,
why it's only allowing me the 40 minutes, so it may shut off.
yeah.
But I definitely, when we do have another conversation, because I was asked by Andrew to start cutting these down, not to do an hour and a half.
Okay.
But I absolutely am zeroing in on, you know, you're saying eye movement is part of it. And as I understand, there's a whole field of basically where you look up to the right, you're accessing actual memories, looking up to the left is making up memories or accessing your imagination. looking down, you're accessing. And doing that intentionally is making that happen intentionally, right? Is that part of the process?
Yeah, sort of. So what we say very simply is that unlike some brain processes, you'll hear people refer to like right brain and left brain as being different functions. Your memories are stored on both of the hemispheres of your brain. So it's right and left memories are stored. And so to fully kind of activate those memories, which we want to do when we're processing trauma, even though it sounds scary, we have to stimulate both the right and left hemispheres of your brain. So originally, if you were to watch EMDR, it almost looks like hypnosis because it'd be like follow this from the right to left side. And now therapists do have like a light bar that moves from the right to left side. Clients can look at that. But then we've discovered that, processing sometimes even goes deeper and is more vivid when people are able to close their eyes. So now I have this little device that basically clients can hold in their hands, and it vibrates from the right to left side. If you don't want to hold it, you can like stick it under your knees. Little kids, sometimes I'll put it in their socks. And that does the same thing. It's stimulating both the right and left hemisphere of your brain. So the way that it works is that we ask people to come up with a target. So maybe the target is something like, I was bullied in middle school. And I remember vividly this time where somebody slammed my locker. So we think about the target. And then I ask a series of questions like, what is the picture of the worst part of that memory? So maybe it's like, my locker slammed, I'm standing there crying, I'm embarrassed, right? What feelings are associated with it? So here comes, some more depth. So the feelings might be embarrassment, sadness. What happens in your body? So we just talked about it's a mind-body process. So bodies, have memory stored in them as well. So that's like, I feel sick to my stomach. I feel very tense. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I get lightheaded. Okay, so that's the body. And then what did you believe about yourself at that time is the final question. And that's something like, I am never going to have any friends and everybody hates me, right? So then we'll bring all this stuff up. So the picture, the emotions, the body, and then what we call the negative cognition. And then I'll turn on the bilateral stimulation. And what happens is this amazing phenomenon that's rapid memory recall. So they'll start with that thing that they wanted to work on, and then it might jump to this thing that happened last week. And then it might jump to this other thing that happened to them in college. And then it might jump to this other thing that happened to them, another time. And what happens is actually we're connecting the neurons from the right left hemisphere of their brain. I always say that a trauma brain kind of feels like this. We kind of feel, hypervigilant, like everything's a little spiky. When we're connecting both sides, we're like merging those hemispheres together. And immediately EMDR has what I call like a lightening effect. Like, you're never going to change what happened to you, right? But you can change the way that you feel about it. So there's almost just like, wow, I brought all this stuff up that I haven't brought up in a really long time. And I didn't even know that was in there, right? It's almost this like resurrection. And then I just feel lighter. I feel like, whoa, I'm not carrying that stuff with me anymore. Like trauma in the body kind of feels like rocks being stacked into your body, and it feels like weighed down. And EMDR, instead of like traditional talk therapy, maybe we'll take a rock off. We'll work on that a little bit. EMDR is like taking like this big scoop of rocks out at once. And so again, like we have this research that tells us that somewhere around 13 sessions or more, like people have long lasting effects. So we'll have EMDR therapists go into like disaster sites and do it quickly, right? Or, crime scenes, and we'll do some EMDR so that people can like immediately feel relief from processing their trauma.
That sounds like a recontextualizing how someone feels about something in a sense.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about two things: Scientology, because it
Yeah.
goes to their religious practice in a sense of believing that everything happens as stored memory in a sense. It's
Yeah.
but then also hemisync came up as well. That whole synchronization of the left and the right lobe to come together as a singular processing place,
Yeah.
rather than putting it in both sides, being able to have a better connection between the two sides, a better sharing, random access and read only meet somewhere in
Yeah.
the middle. So
Yeah.
is there a long-term effect of that you've noticed of better cognitive function overall?
Yeah, I think the most immediate effect is just symptom relief, because depending on your level of trauma, people have nightmares, or they're not eating, or they're eating too much, or they're wanting to do drugs, or, whatever. There's like a bunch of symptoms that come with trauma. So I think immediately there's like well, at first, I always warn people, at first, it might feel a little disruptive, right? Because we're bringing all this stuff to the surface. Like, you might actually have more vivid dreams, or you might, have to relive some of the stuff that you don't want to. So it's a little unpleasant at first, but the more kind of like digging out of our nervous system we're doing, again, like, we're sleeping better. We're thinking about going outside. We're maybe calling that friend when we're in this really depressive state. We're maybe, feeding our body nutritious foods. So I'd say that's the immediate effect. And then the long-term effect is we're getting rid of those like really bad symptoms like nightmares and, all of that. They go away.
With all our might. From the depths of despair to the heights of grace, every misstep